I'm going to be talking about strategies of interaction. In particular, I'm going to be discussing meta-meaning strategies. I'm going to talk about a series of individual works, thinking about von Forster and thinking about his definition of cognition, computations of computations in observing systems. And I'm really thinking of the second order of cybernetic systems. So the observer, and now Randolph Glanville calls the composer, interacts with a system that has input functionality and different loops of functionality, which is output, which then the observer composer looks at again and interacts with. The Exquisite Mechanism of Shivers, 1991, is the first I'll talk about. The work, I describe what I call re-embodied intelligence, where other people have used digital systems to parse grammars and so on and write texts. I wanted to cheat a little bit. So what I did was I wrote a text and then I made a series of substitutions for that text. Imagine you can take any one from any row. There are 33 variable lines, and you can keep building new sections. I was interested in generative image, generative text, and generative music as part of the system for the ICC in Tokyo. Along with this, some beautiful versions were made that, in fact, this is from Tokyo, from the catalog. You can see that this is an example of kind of a branching diagram. An immaculate figure of speech reproduces, and so on. It was also, Art Intact was a CD-ROM version that was made that also had historians writing about the work. And there was also a version that was a DVD that came out much later, and a series of artists contributed these. But in a certain way, they're the most perfect catalog because you actually can interact with the system. Passage sets, one pulls pivots at the tip of the tongue. Instead of having individual words, I got much more interested in phrases and kind of sentences. I was very influenced by the poet Mallarmé. And there was a roller and trackball and 3 screens. And on those screens, on the center screen, was a 150 image panorama that you could navigate by moving this white rectangle around. You could zoom in to a certain section of the work or zoom further in. And so I called this a navigable poem. And when you were zoomed in at this level, if you clicked anywhere on the image, it would call up a video on the right-hand screen, and you would hear me speaking the poetic text. But I was very interested also visually that you could read this text in different orders. There was also a very interesting, if you clicked on a word, it loaded that word into a kind of poem generator that had different lines. Or you could click random and it would make a random text. Every one of these words was linked back to a section in the original 150 panorama. One thing, this meta-meaning idea enabled you to take a particular word, and as it was decontextualized, it might have a different kind of branch of meaning. I loaded the dice in this by often having homonyms and puns, and so given the context, it actually shifted in meaning. So as a user of the system, you could actually watch meaning arise and change, which I was very excited about. The work was very much influenced, as I said, by Stéphane Mallarmé, and I was commissioned then by the Canadian National Gallery to make a work on a famous poetic text by Mallarmé. So Red Dice Déchiffré was this piece that was commissioned by the Canadian National Gallery. Using dice thrown will never annul chance, both in French and English. And I used an interface strategy using a Wacom tablet, where I could use a Wacom pen. By touching on different words, it would call up a grid or individual modules of text and video. of a kind of meta text that I wrote about the original text. The system also had a recombinant music section, and it also had recombinant poetic text. So there were many different menus, and as you clicked, it would build up a sequence which you could also play back. I used the idea that Mallarmé was to his social milieu, as the computer was to the history of things that led up to the computer. So I was having images of things like the Jacquard leaves and so on. This shows you what some of these, at the bottom frames, you can see the video sequences. With the pen, you could touch on those. And as you touched on any of the words, you would hear them spoken. So it was actually a rendition of the Mallarmé text. There were beautiful images from power looms, from dams, from many different situations. You know, I was very interested in Ada Lovelace and her very early writings, and her being influenced by the power loom, and also her talking already in 1842 about the potential of operating and making electronic music. I've always found that an interesting area. Exchange fields had a very unique kind of, again, 3 screens. The center screen was the operative screen. There were 13 furniture sculptures, each one having a kind of individualist interaction that would then, on the center screen, trigger a movement by Regina van Berkel. And if 2 people used these simultaneously, the image would overlay up to 4 people at one time. So there was this very second order, very uncanny experience of your physical body being positioned in these interface furniture sculptures, which then triggered these beautiful video choreography. This is also a generative system. Each one of these different devices had a drone, which was a different pitch that would also come in. So as people interacted with the system, it was also playing out in interactive music. There were these physical sculptures, and we used a little beam, and when you positioned your body within these sculptures, the beam was broken, and it said, if broken, play movie 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, related to a particular part of the body. And again, it had this uncanniness of you interacting in a circular causal way, in a very, but also very embodied kind of interface strategy. And the world generator was a virtual world generating system. I was very interested in could people make virtual worlds in real time? This is, very early on. And you could have 3D objects, random choices, behaviors, movies, texture maps, stills, poetic text, music loops. And just by interacting with this system and putting things into the world, you could, in real time, build a virtual world. And it meant that young children could use it. It was very simple to use. On the other hand, I believe we're on the cusp of a new linguistics. And the idea is that you could actually watch meaning arise and change as you put these different media elements into neighboring patterns. I wrote about fields of meaning. There was also a very early video. So the video avatar would show people in the space. So some people were in Tokyo, some people in Germany, and they were interacting in real time in this digital virtual world. We're now working on the Insight Engine project, which is a new transdisciplinary research which came out of working with Otto Rossler, our book Neo-Sentience, the Benevolence Engine. That book had a kind of very pragmatic set of ideas, and the book had hundreds of micro chapters, and we were very interested in by association. Any 2 chapters could suggest a new area of research. So we built this first Insight Engine. So different researchers, there was a database behind this, there was computational linguistic analysis of that, and as you clicked on any 2 things, it would call up the most meaningful items. We're right now working on re-offering this system to be a legal system that can be used. There were also a set of sentences, a kind of sentence generator related to my poetic sentences. In this case, it used keywords out of the text. It was a very, very exciting system.